Welcome to Sacerdotus Hangouts, the broadcast that answers doubts about God, the Catholic Church, science, philosophy, and other worldly topics from your doubt.
Hello, welcome to another broadcast of Sacerdotus Hangouts. I decided to do something different this time. Instead of just talking on different topics or whatnot and pretty much meandering, I decided to let people who follow me online or read my blogs, my sites, listen to my podcasts, radio podcasts, or know me personally to just send questions. And I choose the ones that are I think appropriate because obviously some people will ask personal questions or things like that that I feel are not really important for anybody to know. But just questions that are relevant to what I know and my life, my experience, and what I focus my life on at the moment. So I decided to dedicate this episode of Sacerdotus Hangouts to ask Sacerdotus, to ask questions. So just give me a moment until I get all the questions from email and tweets, Google Plus, Facebook, and all that, and I'll choose the ones that I feel are interesting. Okay, the first question I see that I think is interesting is regarding the book that I just released, "Atheism is Stupid." And this person is asking me, and I'm not going to reveal names or not because I like to respect people's privacy, but this person is asking me, why did I choose the title? And the answer is pretty simple. Obviously, if you have read the book or whatnot, or I think Amazon shows a bit of the first pages of the book, you could actually see it yourself. I explain why I use the title "Atheism is Stupid," and though this title is provocative, it serves a purpose, and it's more of a personal purpose, if you will. And what I mean by that is the title "Atheism is Stupid" reflects the conclusion that I came to as an atheist when I started to question my atheistic beliefs, my atheistic ideas. So, pretty much, when I started to reevaluate atheism in my life and just atheism in general as a concept, I started to see that it really didn't add up when you compare it with facts, with information out there, depending on the topic within subtopic within atheism. It, when I started to vet it, atheism against these facts and these ideas, I started to realize that atheism was not this rational idea, this rational position, this position that is intellectual, that somehow is enlightened. I started to see that it was not that at all. And if you read the book, I go into more detail on this about free thinking, the whole idea that atheists pretend or claim to be free thinkers. I started to question that, and I just started to realize that no, we are not free thinkers. And I say we are not because I was thinking from the point of view of an atheist back then. After evaluating the whole idea of free thinking, it's not true at all. We do not freely think. All atheists do is recycle, rehash banal arguments already refuted. And the more and more I started to read, the more and more I started to question atheism, the more and more I started to realize this, that no, atheism is not a position, it's not an enlightenment movement or a form of free thinking. It's just repeating somebody else's old ideas, somebody's old doubts and whatnot, which have already been refuted centuries. And what's funny is that the atheism that we see today mainly it comes from the 17th, 18th centuries. And many of the questions these European white men brought up were already answered by the church fathers and others throughout church history. They were already answered. And obviously, unfortunately, people were not that well educated during the so called period of enlightenment. Education started to get more of a stronghold, it started to become more secular, more available to the people. So knowledge wasn't readily available to everybody at the point. So I do not expect people from the 17th, 18th century to know about the church fathers and the other saints and other theologians, doctors of the church, philosophers, and whatnot. I do not expect them to have had this knowledge. It's not like today that you could easily go on Google and Google things. A lot of people use Wikipedia to get their quick facts or information. In the 17th, 18th century, they didn't have that stuff. So what you knew is what you knew. And obviously, these white European males, they knew certain things and they questioned certain things based on what they knew. And obviously, they doubted church teachings, they questioned ideas. Like, for example, Thomas Paine, he compared the statues of the Virgin Mary to Greek goddesses and whatnot. And Diane, I believe he wrote in Age of Reason. And he just came to the conclusion that Christianity was just a rehashing of pagan ideas. There's nothing unique about Christianity. But then when you read about Thomas Paine, he only had a sixth grade education on what we would consider the equivalent of a sixth grade education today. And he did not know all the facts that we know today. And so all he did was just read a couple things. He heard a lot of things in the coffee shops because back in the days, they used to hang out in the coffee shops, the Starbucks of the day, if you will. And these white elitist men used to gather in the coffee shops and discuss these ideas of the so-called Enlightenment period. So Thomas Paine used to hang out with them, and he used to pick up their ideas, and he came up with the whole pamphlet called Age of Reason. And when you read it, if you're not well educated, you're gonna fall for all the rhetoric in it. You're gonna say, "Oh yeah, he's right. Christianity is a whole bunch of BS. It's a whole bunch of borrowed mythology and whatnot, the heathen mythology, as he called paganism." But if you're an educated person, if you studied history, if you studied theology, if you studied philosophy, um, or anything related to the humanities, to history, humanity, paganism, and whatnot, you will see that Thomas Paine was really just writing nonsense. Really, he really did not bother to research the the things related to Christianity and Catholicism and whatnot. He did not bother at all to research to confirm his ideas whether they were factual or not. He did not bother to do that at all. So you're an educated person. You read through Age of Reason. You're like, wait, this guy's an idiot. He's a moron. I mean, I like Thomas Paine. Don't get me wrong. He was a cool guy. I would have loved to meet him if we had a time machine. If we go back to time, I would love to meet Thomas Paine. He was a great thinker for his day, but he was also not well educated, and he just borrowed ideas that were already circulating. He never bothered to research them, whatnot. And again, it's probably not his fault because again, the information superhighway did not exist back then, so information wasn't easy to obtain right away. Yes, they had libraries, but a lot of the times elitists, professors, people in universities had access to that, and the common man did not. which is a crime, a sin in itself, in my opinion. But so we cannot blame Thomas Paine for his ignorance. He was a product of his day, of his time, or not. The same with other Enlightenment period thinkers. They were a product of their day. And again, today, if you're well educated in the humanities, history, things like that, those fields of study, and you read Age of Reason and all these different ideas, these books, these pamphlets back in the day questioning religion and God, you will see that it's a whole bunch of nonsense. It doesn't fit in with the facts. It's just somebody just writing what they thought was a big enlightenment or accomplishment in regards to thought. But in fact, it's not very well researched because had Thomas Paine done his research about Christianity, paganism, and so forth, he would have burned Age of Reason. But it's still a respectable work of art. It shows the thinking of a man from that period, and it's a good read just for the literary aspect, but not for the content. Because again, if you're an expert, if you're a student in history and the humanities in particular, you will see the faults and the fallacies and misconceptions in Thomas Paine's Age of Reason. So the back to the book, atheism is stupid. That was my conclusion. I'm not calling atheists stupid. I want to make that clear again for the hundredth time. I am not calling atheists stupid. I'm calling the concept of atheism stupid. And again, that's from my point of view, from my experience, from questioning, from vetting atheism as a concept and all its sub concepts. I came to the conclusion that it was just ridiculous, it was just stupid. It's a concept that just makes up all these kinds of claims and conclusions and offers no evidence or no support for it or not. And if you see my many chats on Twitter and different social networks, you will see that the different so-called atheists who message me, they show the same thing. They rehash these misconceptions just like Thomas Paine and others, and sometimes it could be a bit frustrating as well because you know that they're wrong, but they don't seem to see that. And you try to show them evidence, you try to show them sites and citations and references that are not religious, and they still do not get it. They still are hard in their idea that what they think in regards to their atheistic position is correct, when in fact it's not. So the book Atheism Stupid, the title is just my conclusion. What I think atheism really is from an atheistic point of view, as an atheist back then years ago, vetting atheism, I came to the conclusion atheism is stupid, it's ridiculous, it doesn't work for me as a man of science, man of philosophy, as a thinker, as a curious thinker, as a thinker who questions what I think and what I believe and what I know. I just found atheism to be stupid, not work for me. It didn't work for me. If you're an atheist out there and you're listening to me right now, if it works for you, then I mean, fine. I mean, it works for you. But for me, as a man of science, as a science student, as a philosopher student, amateur philosopher, because I'm not at the PhD level, obviously, hopefully in the future, I would love to get a PhDs in the different areas that I study, if possible. If I have the time and I'm still alive, I would love to get to the doctorate level. But in the meantime, from my experience, my knowledge, and philosophy, science, and all that, and my love for them, and also as an overall free thinker that's not afraid to question what I believe and what I know, I just didn't find atheism worked for me. It held me back. If I stayed atheist, I will not be thinking. I would just be stuck in my conclusions, just like many so-called atheists today. You're stuck in your conclusion, you become bitter, and then you start picking targets and attacking them, believing that you're right when you never bother to question your own ideas. And that's not what I want in my life. I'm a young guy. I'm still curious. I'm still learning, still questioning and whatnot. I don't want to settle for just these random ideas and concepts and just leave it at that and not question them because what's the point? I would just become what atheists call theists, just bounded thinkers that don't bother to go beyond the scope of knowledge and question that knowledge and whatnot. And because that's what science is and philosophy, you question, you may come to a conclusion regarding a certain study or experiment or whatnot, but decades from now, that study, experiment, whatever that conclusion that you found in your work may be refuted by physicists on September 14th last year. Physicists had their own ideas about how the universe worked in regards to the forces out there. Lo and behold, comes Albert Einstein saying, wait a minute, there's gravitational waves. They exist. And some people were against him. So, he's crazy. And some of them accepted it as just mathematical, theoretical. But lo and behold, we discovered it in September of last year. So that's what being a free thinker is all about. And if I would have stayed atheist, I wouldn't grow as a person. I wouldn't grow as a student because I would be stuck with the same conclusions from the 17th, 18th century, which are being recycled today by Richard Dawkins and the late Chris Hitchens and Sam Harris, etc., etc., and some of my own professors who are stuck in the atheism tornado cycle of banal arguments that already have been refuted. And if they took the time to research these arguments and find the flaws of them, they would come to the conclusion that I did. And that's why I titled the book Atheism is Stupid, because that's the conclusion I came to. Atheism did not work for me at all. So, for the person who asked the question, why did I name the book Atheism is Stupid? It's not to attack atheists, it's not to be condescending or whatnot. Because again, if atheism works for you, then fine, go for it if it works for you. But it did not work for me. I needed more. I needed to quench my thirst. And atheism was just like a bottle cap of water for me. I took a little sip and it helped me a little bit, but then I wanted more. And atheism did not provide that more for me. I needed to go beyond that, especially as a student of science, student of philosophy, psychology, and biology, and whatnot. I needed more. I'm hungry for knowledge. I needed more, and I see that in theism and belief in faith, because faith could take you anywhere. It's not bounded. It's not held back by anything. It's free. So it allows me to think beyond the box. Whereas atheism kept me in the box. I have to think a certain way. I have to do things a certain way in order to be so-called rational, so-called atheist, so-called free thinker. When in fact I was neither of those as an atheist. I was just believing the same things Dawkins and everybody else before him believed, and nothing new derived from that. So for me, theism opened my mind. It allowed me to freely think, to freely question, and see what really is out there. Like the late Carl Sagan, I want to know. I don't want to just sit down in a chair and say, okay, there's evil in the world, therefore God doesn't exist. Or, okay, I don't see a guy sitting on a throne somewhere floating in the sky, therefore God doesn't exist. Or there's genetic defects in nature, therefore God doesn't exist. I needed more than that. That's just a armchair belief system that doesn't go anywhere. I needed more than that. So that's why for me, theism, faith allows me to think outside of the box instead of just sitting down and just negate everything. Okay, this happened, so there's no God. This happened, there's no God. Where I have no proof of that. What if God wanted it that way? I mean, how do I know? How can I say that? Okay, there's evil in the world. There's murderers, child molesters. There's crazy priests out there raping kids or whatnot. therefore God doesn't exist. I mean, that's just false equivocation fallacy. It doesn't work. It's not rational. I need to know whether there is a God or no God. I just can't just come to a conclusion, say, okay, there's no God, and then try to pin whatever excuse to validate that statement, which is what a lot of atheists do. They just come out with all these conclusions and then they just try to make it work. They build up a narrative and they seem convinced about it and they will fight you to the death. Of course, I'm being sarcastic, but they become very aggressive to defend that position. And when you ask for evidence, it doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't work. So I needed out of that. So that's why I came to the conclusion that atheism was stupid. It did not work for me. Now, another question that I see here is why believe in Jesus? Why not Muhammad or Buddha or any other deity? And there's many reasons for that. And I'll try to like sum it up into the best I can. Why from atheism I went to Christianity, namely Catholicism. And I wrote a post about this on my site years ago, I think in 2011. And basically, I study different religions. Like I said, I like to learn. I love knowledge. I mean, there's nothing greater on earth, in my opinion, than knowing things, learning things. We're given this short lifespan. And biologists believe that the human being lasts 120 years. So we're given this short lifespan. And from among those 120 years, anything could happen. You could get sick, you'll get dementia, you'll get Alzheimer's, and start deteriorating. So the years, the lifespan is even shorter when you think of it in that way. So you have this short time pretty much, and you're like a sponge. You're learning, and you see this with children, with babies. They have their eyes wide open. They're studying you. They're studying your facial expressions. They're listening to you, listening to the sounds you make, the languages that you speak, the intonation, the inflection. They're listening to all these things. Little babies, little infants, even before they're born, the fetus is listening, is hearing the sounds from the outside world, and it's processing all of that, and it's trying to make sense of all of that, and it's making connections. And that's how the human being learns. It starts to absorb all of these stimuli and tries to make sense of it and connect it. And then it prunes what it doesn't need via the process of pruning, according to cognitive psychologists. And we start to develop our temperament, our personality, and all that based on not only genetics, but what we acquire from the outside world, from nurturing, from nature. So these two things are working together, forming us as we grow, as we get older. And like I said, this is a short amount of time to really learn. So to learn something is a blessing, no matter what it is. To learn, to experience something is a blessing, because that's what a human being does for its lifespan. It's experiencing things, it's learning things, whatnot. So for me, I always valued learning, knowledge, and trying to understand different things, trying to understand the world, trying to understand all the things that compose the human race, that compose myself, and whatnot. So I started to study different faiths, different religions, and whatnot. And every religion has something good about it. I mean, the Catechism says that every religion, the Catechism go as far as saying, I'm paraphrasing, that the religions of the world are a preparation for the gospel of Christ. So this is the way the church sees it. The church sees all these different religions in the world as God preparing these people who hold these different religions for the gospel. And we see that when the Europeans and so forth, the missionaries came to the so-called New World, how they were able to convince the natives about Christianity, about Christ, and whatnot. And unfortunately, some of them forced them, but the majority of them actually taught the natives and the Africans and so forth. They actually taught them about the faith and with example, with love and so forth. Unfortunately, we always hear about the bad, the Spaniards in particular, who were very abusive to the natives. Not all of them, but a good number of them were abusive towards the natives and whatnot. And again, that's because they had their fallen human nature and whatnot. Just like there's people today that are discriminatory towards people of other races and whatnot, of other ethnicities. But beside the point, these missionaries were able to convince natives about Christ, about the Virgin Mary, about the Bible, and all that because there was some things in their own faith that were very similar, especially in regards to the concept of God. The natives believed that God is a great spirit and created the world and whatnot. And Genesis says that the spirit of God was hovering over the waters. So these are images, these are things that were the natives were able to link with, to connect, things that were very similar. And they say, wait a minute, your God is not so much different than our God. He says the Great Spirit. And that's pretty much what the book of Genesis is describing in the first chapter, this Great Spirit hovering over the waters. So the missionaries were able to capitalize on that and convince them that, yeah, God does exist. God is real. And you had your ideas of God, and they're not necessarily wrong, but we have these connections. God is a creator, He's a spirit. He cares for humanity, He provides for humanity. Whatnot. So the natives and the Africans and so forth were able to make those connections with the missionaries, the Catholic missionaries, the Franciscans, Dominicans, Jesuits, and so forth, who came to the this part of the world, the so-called New World, and evangelized these people. They were able to make those connections because, as the Catechism says, these different religions out there in the world are a preparation for the gospel of Christ. They're like little bits and pieces of the entire picture. The gospel of Christ is the entire puzzle, the entire picture, the entire meal. So, as an atheist studying different religions, I started to notice that. I started to notice different pieces here and there in Islam and paganism, different forms of paganism, and the different Protestant denominations out there, and Eastern Orthodox churches, Hinduism, Buddhism. I started to notice these different pieces and whatnot. But then there were certain things that I did not like about the teachings, about their ideas and whatnot, and it was not attractive to me. Then when I came to Catholicism, I started to see the complete picture. It made more sense. It linked back to Jesus Christ, this man, this person who claimed to be God and whatnot. It linked to him, and the teachings were more rational. You could see when you study the teachings of the church that a lot of thought was put into it. It wasn't just men that just sat down and started writing things and then just said, okay, this is what we believe. No, they took centuries, centuries, centuries to get these ideas, these doctrines, these dogmas down on paper, so to speak, to nail them down, that they made sense and so forth. And the whole process of using reason, using philosophy and so forth was very attractive to me. And then as I learned more about the church and the fact that the Catholic Church gave us science, modern science, as we know it today. Back then, science existed in primitive forms, yes, but it was more like a trade, like alchemy and whatnot. It was more of a trade. It wasn't this great source of knowledge that we have today or form of getting knowledge. Uh, the Catholic Church was the one that elevated science and made it into this discipline, to this field of study, a field that actually works and produces. It was the Catholic Church. And the Catholic Church funded Galileo, Bruno, and all these different scientists The church funded them, gave them money. The church wanted to know about nature and all that. That's why I never understood why some people out there who call themselves atheists or people who are generally anti-Catholic, I never understood why they came to the conclusion that the Catholic Church is anti-science or against science or try to stifle science. An in-depth study of history, you will see the opposite. The Catholic Church was elevating science. The Catholic Church put science on the pedestal. And you want to criticize why they were so strict about it. I'll tell you why. It's not because they were scared of discoveries or scared that whatever science found was somehow threatening to religion. The church did not care about that. That was not even on the church's mind. The church was strict with certain scientists and whatnot because they wanted the science to be objective. They wanted the science to be pure. They wanted the facts to speak for themselves, not for the person studying the science or performing the experiments to impose on the research. That's not what they want. And we see that today. At many universities, many scientific institutions, they're very strict with how experiments are done, how research is done. And that's why we have peer review to make sure that what the researcher or the researchers come up with, the conclusions that they come up with after their experiments or studies, to make sure that they add up with the data, that they make sense, that it's not just the experimenter imposing his or her bias on the data. So they have peer review to have different heads, so to speak, different brains, analyze the data and the conclusion and see whether the experimenter did everything correctly. So the church was no different. The church centuries before did that. They wanted to make sure that Galileo and Bruno and these people got the data right. They came to the right conclusion based on the data and the data alone, not their personal opinions or what they think is correct or what they think is right. So this whole idea that the church was against science, it's not founded at all. It's not. I mean, there's certain denominations out there that fundamentalists that are against science, yes, but in regards to the Catholic Church, the Holy Catholic Church, the Catholic Church headed by the Pope, Pope Francis, now at the current time, the church never was against science. She was very strict on how science was conducted, yes, but for the reason of having pure research, pure science. Science is free from bias, free from inference and whatnot. Just like today, many institutions, I dare say all of them, if they want to be taken seriously, they are very strict on how research is done and methodologies and whatnot, and whatever experiment or field of study the scientist is working in. So I like that about the church, about the Catholic Church, that is, it literally gave us science and was very strict with how science was conducted. It put science on a pedestal, and the scientific method that we use today came from a Franciscan friar, Friar Bacon, and the DNA came from Mendor and whatnot, Mendel and whatnot. The cosmic inflation, the theory of cosmic inflation, or more colloquially known as the Big Bang theory, not the television show, but the theory itself, the scientific theory, came from a priest, a Monsignor, George Lemaitre. And all these things were very attractive to me as a student of science. I said, hey, look at this. This is, as an atheist, I was taught, I read that atheist propaganda, that religion is against science and whatnot. No, that's not true. Studying myself, I saw the facts that the Catholic Church was the one that gave us science as we know it today. And that was very attractive to me as an atheist. And of course, with philosophy, I mean, Thomas Aquinas, Augustine, you read the Church's fathers, even Therese, the little flower, who was not a genius, with all due respect, who was not a PhD person or candidate or whatever, or graduate, but her wisdom, her knowledge, and Teresa of Avila, and John of the Cross, I mean, I could go on and on, all these different saints, many of them who were not very well educated, but they had this strong sense of philosophy, strong sense of wisdom that could only come from a supernatural force, a supernatural mind that inspired them. So all these things drew me to this religion called Catholicism. So that's why I ended up in the Catholic faith. All the other religions just didn't work for me, didn't add up. Islam was very strict. It seemed like a religion based on control, a religion based on the splicing of Judaism and Catholicism. If you really look at Islam, and with all respect to Muslims out there, of course, I'm not, mocking your religion or attacking your faith. I'm just saying what how I saw it as an atheist when I was studying Islam. When to me, it just came across as Muhammad took things from Judaism, things from Catholicism, and just made up a whole new thing, a whole new system. And that's the way it appeared to me, and it wasn't attracted to me at all. And pretty much the controlling aspect of controlling women, and women are somehow inferior. Those things really did not attract me at all. I like the idea that a lot of Muslims were great scientists and thinkers, but other than that, Islam did not make sense to me, did not work at all. I like the idea of Ramadan fasting and all that. Those things are okay, and the idea of being generous and helping other people, the tenets and whatnot, praying and whatnot, and but then again, the prayer itself. I mean, praying. It seemed too controlling. I mean, I like prayer that's free, that comes from the spirit. The spirit inspires you to pray. You open your mouth, and it's the spirit that's inspiring you to pray. That's the kind of prayer I like. That I'm not too much of a fan of written down prayers and whatnot because it becomes mechanical. You're not really paying attention to what you're saying. You're just doing it mechanically without realizing, without internalizing the prayer, without becoming the prayer. I like prayer that I become, in a sense, that the prayer becomes me. That's the kind of prayer that I like, and not just mechanical prayers that somebody else wrote and then I had to repeat it and not really think about it. That kind of prayer does not really attract me. So the whole idea of praying 5 times a day and trying to figure out where Mecca is and bowing to that, it seemed too mechanical for me, too raw. It did not work for me at all. And with Buddhism, Hinduism, the whole idea of reincarnation. I mean, logically speaking, scientifically speaking, it doesn't make sense at all. Uh, you live a life, you die, and then if you didn't meet the certain mark, you come back as a lesser being and whatnot in order to try to make it. But then you don't have knowledge of your previous life, so then how can you make repairs, so to speak? How can you make amends of where you failed or improvements of where you failed in your previous life? You have no memory of it. It's like if you take a test, right? You take the SAT or a test to get into a school and you failed it, but at least you got to see it, you got to experience it. So you go back, you study, you prepare, you know where you did wrong, and hopefully the next time you do better. But imagine you take the test and you do bad, and then you have no memory of the test, or that you even took it, and then you go to a different place and take the test, and without knowledge that you already took it and you had experienced it. How are you going to do better? So the whole idea of reincarnation just didn't work for me. It just doesn't make sense. It's not rational. Not, and I won't even get into the physics part because in quantum physics we learned that subatomic particles behave randomly. There's no set pattern of how subatomic particles work. So the whole idea of that there's some kind of a mechanism that allows the human life to reincarnate, like there's a program within the space-time continuum that allows you to reincarnate. It's just not possible based on what we know of quantum physics. It doesn't make sense at all. I mean, call me a nerd over that, but I mean that's just the way I think. That's just the way I analyze things. and whatnot. And with paganism again, the whole idea that certain things in nature have power and that they can control people, specifically with Wicca and Santeria and all these things. That if you bury an onion or a tomato with ashes or a personal item for somebody, that somehow is going to affect them. It just seems silly to me. It seems very ridiculous. But I see the way they think because the ancestors believed that these things, these fruits, these vegetables were gave life, and in the sense we don't eat, we die. So in a sense, vegetables, fruits, meats, grains, all these things do have a certain power, if you will, biologically speaking. Whereas they give us nutrition, they give us life or allow life, sustain life or not. But to go and stretch that idea and believe that, I guess that's somebody sending me a question now. Anyhow, to think that these fruits or whatever these things in nature have power over people or time, it's really ridiculous. Why not? And that goes into the horoscope. A lot of people love reading the horoscope. They claim that they're a certain sign and whatnot, and these stars are billions of miles away. There's no way their gravitational forces have any effect on us at all. So it makes no sense to believe that these stars far away somehow dictate our lives or not. It makes no, they're just too far away. And mind you, the light that we see in the sky, the stars that we see in the sky, this is light that has been traveling for millions of years that we're just seeing right now. So these stars out there that we see in the night sky, that light, that image that we see in the sky is old. It's from millions of years ago. Those stars probably exploded by now or they died out, but we're still seeing them like if they're still active. When in fact they probably went supernova a long time ago, and that light from the supernova hasn't reached us yet. The event, because it's so far away. So to think that these stars out there, these constellations, have some kind of effect on us is just ridiculous. Not to mention that every 42,000 years or so, the the constellations move. Because space is expanding. So people say that, what is it? I don't know if it's Gemini, if it's in June, I don't know, or Pisces in March, or Taurus in April, whatnot. They're not really in March, April, or June. These constellations, these signs, because they already moved. The constellations already moved because space is expanding. So the whole system is just wrong. People that were born in so-called sign of Taurus or Pisces are not really in the sign of Taurus or Pisces, because these constellations already moved from the position. Again, we see it because the light is old, but we know better now because we know space is expanding. We know stars. The light from stars takes billions of years, millions of years, depending on how far it is from us, to reach us. So the whole idea of horoscopes having influence over our lives and power to dictate our destiny is just it's hogwash, it's nonsense, it's unfounded. So naturally, it wouldn't work for me. I wouldn't believe in that stuff. So Catholicism was like the only religion that made sense to me. It was rational or not. I mean, it took a while for me to accept the idea of God being a spirit or human beings having souls and Jesus becoming bread and wine. Yeah, those things took a long time for me to really like process and understand because, as you could tell, the way I'm speaking right now, I analyze things via logic and via science and things like that because that's what I know. That's my field of study. That's what I grew up on. Ever since I was a kid, that's the way I always thought. So if you came to me that telling me that a Disney fairy existed or not, I would question the heck out of you as a kid. Prove it. Show me the evidence. I mean, and if you didn't do so, then you were in trouble because I would just come back at you with a whole bunch of questions. And I used to drive teachers crazy. I remember in elementary school they used to show Cinderella and Snow White and all these cartoons in the auditorium. And I used to raise my hand and ask the teacher all these questions, and he used to annoy the heck out of them. Because that's the way I was. I just asked questions. I was always little doubting Thomas, if you will, and I always wanted to know why. And when I wanted to know why, I wanted to know why. I wanted you to lay it out for me, not just give me a Sunday school version of facts or uh, cartoonish Mickey Mouse version of facts. I wanted to know for real the facts and the information. Or whatnot. So that's mainly the reason why I like Catholicism. And then when you add the person of Jesus Christ, I mean, Jesus Christ obviously did exist. We know for a fact that Jesus Christ existed. I know that we have so-called scholars out there, Richard Carrier and whatnot, that continue to push the idea that Christ is a myth or whatnot. But again, like I said before in the beginning, these are ideas that are rehashed. Certain people thought that Christ was a myth. They thought that Christ was an amalgam of different pagan heroes or personalities in the past, and the early Christians put all those together and created the image of the sun god Jesus Christ, and whatnot. When in fact he's um, Dionysus, or what's his name, Mithras, or Horus or whatnot. But again, if you read these pagan mythologies and whatnot, you see it has nothing to do with Jesus Christ at all. And you read the history of Christianity um, from a secular source, even a secular source. You don't have to read something by a Catholic or by a Protestant or whatever. Just read something from a secular source, and you see that there's no connection between Christ and all these different pagan deities and whatnot, other than the fact that these other deities were called deities. That's pretty much the only thing they have in common, the whole concept of deity. But as far as the nitty gritty of it, they have nothing in common at all. And we have third party sources, external sources, secular sources that show that Jesus Christ was a real person and did miracles. They called it magic because that's the way people thought back then, but that performed things, and that the disciples said that he died and the body disappeared and it was resurrected. One, there's records of these things. One, even renowned historian Michael Grant, who passed away a decade or so ago, 2 decades ago, who's very a renowned historian. He said that the whole idea of Christ being a myth is unfounded. That modern scholarship has pretty much squashed the idea that Christ never existed as a myth. Only a few people, one or two, three people, have the idea that Christ is a myth. The rest of it, even the scholar Bart, who's an agnostic, he acknowledges that Christ existed because there's so much overwhelming evidence that Jesus Christ existed. As in fact, there's more evidence for Christ than for Alexander the Great, and even for Socrates. We only know of Socrates, this great philosopher. We only know of Socrates because Plato wrote about him. Plato, another philosopher, wrote about Socrates. Socrates never wrote anything down. There's no paper, no document, nothing from him that was penned by him. We know of him because of Plato. And as you know, if you study philosophy, philosophers love to create thought experiments. They create these fancy little mental illustrations to bring about a point or a discussion. Who's to say that Plato didn't invent Socrates in one of these thought experiments and wrote about him? And in fact, he never existed. Who's to say that? But we trust that Socrates existed because Plato happened to mention him in one of his writings. But it could be the case that he never existed and Plato just invented this personality called Socrates to make a point in his writings. We just don't have evidence. We don't have a body. We don't have anything to prove that Socrates really existed. But with Christ, we have this overwhelming history. Granted, we don't have photographs or video because that didn't exist. And granted, the gospels that we have are copies of other gospels, but the mere fact that they are copies tells you logically that there were older copies. That this is not just something that was just written in the second or third century. We know that there are copies, yes. But why are there copies? Because unfortunately, we didn't have Xerox machines back then. So there was no way to keep good, sturdy copies of originals back then. And again, that's not the fault of the people. The technology was just not there. But the mere fact that the Gospels and the writings of the Scriptures from the New Testament are copies tells us that there were older copies. And recently in 2014, we found a piece of the Gospel of Mark, which dates from the time of Christ, around the year 30, probably 40 or so. They found a piece behind a funeral mask, and that from the Gospel of Mark that's older than what we have today. So that tells us that there are even older manuscripts out there that we have yet to discover. And again, if you understood how the people in back then worked, how they wrote down things and whatnot, they used papyrus and whatnot, and it was hard to come by. It's not like today that you could just go to Staples and buy a ream of paper for like $16 or something, and you have thousands of sheets of paper, and you could type on it, you could print on it, you could handwrite on them. They didn't have that privilege back then. If you were wealthy, yes, you could go and get your papyrus, but the disciples, the early Christians, didn't have the luxury to go and they didn't have a Staples back then where they could go and get papyrus and then write the Gospels, and then this papyrus will last forever. They didn't have that luxury. They did the best they could. Oral tradition and wrote down the best they could. What they wrote was eventually recopy and copy just to preserve it, because the means of writing things down was not the best way. Things rotted. The climate affects paper. And even today, we have books that were printed. I bought a book 3 years ago, and the pages are already turning yellow. So imagine in the first, second, third century, when the early Christians wrote things down, whatnot, these things that were written down did not last long. And again, it's not their fault. It's just that's just the technology that was available to them. But unfortunately, some atheists don't accept that, even though scholars say it. They explain it well, and they defend the Gospels and the New Testament writings because they know that it wasn't easy to keep things locked down in the early centuries. Even before that, it was not so easy. I mean, the Egyptians were smart. They did the hieroglyphics and all that, but even that is fading and falling apart. So each generation, each century had the means to record history, to record knowledge the best they could. And so, unfortunately, the things that we have today in regards to the scriptures are copies. But scholars ensure us that these copies are authentic, that they're accurate, and also testify to the fact that there are older copies out there. And who knows, we may find them. We may find older manuscripts. And so far, the manuscripts we have found, like the one that I told you now regarding to St. Mark's Gospel, it's exactly the same thing as the copies that we have now from the second century, first and second century. So, putting all that into perspective in the person of Jesus Christ, the fact that historians and scholars back them up was very attractive to me as an atheist. And also, from a personal point of view, studying different religions, different gods, and whatnot, Jesus Christ stood out to me more. And I'll tell you why. Because Jesus is the only God, the only deity that actually came to the human race. When you read the stories of other gods, Greek mythology of other faiths, and whatnot, you see man trying to reach out to God. Man is reaching out to God via sacrifices, via prayers, rituals, and whatnot. And many times these gods were so mean to the human. But with Jesus Christ, it's different. It's like a whole different experience. We see God coming to man, God becoming making a promise to come as a human being, making a promise to be born of a woman, and coming as a human baby. And just think about that for a moment. God, the creator, the one that made everything, becomes a human baby. For what? What does human being, what does the human have that's so special that a God, the God, becomes a human being? Not only becomes a human being and is born, but lives among us, doesn't have powers in a sense like Hercules walking around saving people, just living a typical average Joe life like a carpenter, and then suffering and dying on the cross. And again, why? Why would a God do that? Why? What's so special about the human race? And many of you out there listening to me, you can see how ugly the human race is, how how bad we can be as a people with war. With right now in New York in the Northeast, there's people going around slashing people on the trains, um, people raping each other, priests raping kids, teachers raping kids, parents raping kids, parents abusing kids. Uh, I mean, I could go on and on. All the atrocities that human beings do, trafficking humans, trafficking each other, trafficking children, trafficking organs. They kill people, they take the organs out and they sell them on the market. Um, People cheating on each other. They go and they date, they fall in love with each other, whatever, or like each other, and then they go on and they talk to other people like the person they met doesn't exist. And then when that person finds out, they feel crushed because they felt they were the only ones that the other partner was looking at, when in fact he or she had 100 phone numbers or encounters with other people. And then they get hurt, they get depressed, they feel useless, they feel used, they feel unimportant and whatnot. Then we have married people that get married and they get divorced within a week, a month. Then the kids suffer. I mean, I could go on and on how crazy human beings can be. Crazy. I mean, real crazy how human beings can be. And what was in Patterson, I think Patterson, New Jersey, a girl was riding the bicycle in the street and got shot because two gangs were fighting each other and the bullet came and hit her and killed her. And just last week, I think her friend was in his home. This girl who died, her friend who was a boy, was in his home and he got grazed by a bullet too. A friend of the girl that was killed, I think last year or the year before. Children getting shot, killed, getting grazed by bullets. And for a God to become a human being, to live like a human being, not have any special privileges in the sense that he was Superman. Jesus was not like Superman that you could stab him and whatever you stab him with breaks like the Man of Steel. Jesus didn't have that he could have, but he chose not to. He emptied himself. He became a human in all things except sin. So Jesus, I am sure, probably got sick. He probably got stomach viruses. He probably got a cold or flu because he was a human just like us. But yet he was God. And the question that I thought as an atheist is, why would God do that? Why would God become a human being? Why would God put up with the nonsense that human beings portray each day? And human beings are full of drama. I mean, we fight over any little thing. I mean, even in the church. I mean, I get attacked by so-called traditionalists. I get attacked by so-called liberals. Um, it just never ends. I mean, Pope Francis gets attacked all the time. And we're supposed to be loving each other. We're supposed to be friendly. We're supposed to be Christian. Yet we're fighting each other, attacking each other, slandering each other. I mean, human beings are just, I hate to say it, but we can be worse than other animals. We can be worse. Now, these other animals have an excuse. They operate on instinct, but what's our excuse? But for a God to become a human being, to play that role, and to suffer and die for the human being. I mean, that left an impact in me as an atheist. I saw that this God was genuinely in love with the human race. In contrast to the idea that atheists have that God is somehow this wicked dictator that tortures human beings. I did not see that at all. And again, you study the Old Testament manuscripts and whatnot, you see that. You understand why the so-called wrath of God took place. You understand it when you take biblical courses and you understand the exegesis behind the passages and whatnot. It starts to make sense to you. So that's mainly another reason why Christianity, Catholicism became attracted to me, because of the person of Jesus Christ. The God, the creator of the universe, becomes us, becomes like us. In all things except sin, out of love. Hey, I mean, if God comes and suffers and dies because He cares for me, that's a strong message. So that really helped me a lot on my journey from atheism to theism. Jesus Christ was the man. He was the God. He made sense to me. So that's namely the reason why I, chose the Catholic faith. And and then you go into the fact that He remains with us in the Blessed Sacrament and so forth. I mean, I could go on and on, but I don't want to extend that. I want to get to other questions. Another question is, why am I against abortion? Um, Pretty much because it's killing human life, and it's scary to me now. Um, this whole idea that's spreading around that the unborn is not human, that it's just a blob of flesh or tissue, whatnot, where biology, embryology tells us otherwise. We know that an egg gets fertilized and it has the chromosomes from both parents, the male and the female. It's a completely human being. The only difference is that it's in a different stage of development. That's the only difference. Just like I'm of a certain age, and people younger than me are a certain age, people older than me are a certain age, and we all look different. They look younger than me, and these other people look older than me. But we're all human. It's just that we're just in different stages of development. So we cannot discriminate and say that just because a human being is in the womb, or maybe the size of a period, or the size of a thumb or a hand, that is not human or less human. That's just ridiculous. It's just nonsense. It's a human in different stage of development, and we have to. If we love human beings, if we love ourselves, if everything that we have in this world, the law exists to protect human beings, to protect one another. The whole idea of rights exists because we see human beings as having value, that we have rights, free speech, and etc., etc., etc. Because we understand that the human being is a unique creature. We're animals, yes. We come from hominids, yes. But we're different. We can think. We have conscience. We have emotions. We can control these things most of the time. We're able to question. We're able to be self-aware, to self-reflect, to rethink what we think. We're able to do all these things, so we understand that the human being is a special creature. That's why we believe that we have rights, and that these rights come from a creator. So to have abortion really hurts the whole image of the human being. That means that the human being is not special. It's not a unique thing. It doesn't have rights. And when a court or a legal system says that a human being is a human being at a certain point, that's scary. Because what's to stop them from saying that a human being is not human at age 2 or age 3 or age 5? What should stop them from doing that? Nothing. Because if they could say that a human being is not human until born, then they could say a human being is not human until it reaches puberty. The mere fact that that's able to be manipulated is scary, and it should scare you, especially if you believe that abortion is correct. If we are to really respect life and see the human race as special, as something that has rights, inalienable rights, intrinsic worth and value. And we cannot allow abortion to exist. We have to find better ways. I understand that if a girl or a woman gets raped or some incest happens, which is less than 1%, it hardly happens. But it does happen, unfortunately. Then we have to find better ways to deal with the situation. Work better with families so that these things don't happen. Raise our children better so they won't grow up to be psychopaths and go around raping people. We have to do something better. I mean, what's the point of having psychology, the field of psychology, if we're not going to use this knowledge to help people mentally, psychologically, so that family members won't be attracted to each other and get to the point of incest, so that men won't attack women because they feel an urge or whatever to attack women sexually, or women attack men because it happens both ways. A woman can rape a man, attack a man, or a man rape another man, or a woman rape another. It happens. These things are real. That's why I like that show. What's the name of it? American Crime or American Criminal? I forgot the name of it, but it's on ABC, and I missed the last two episodes, but because I was busy. But it's highlighting a case of a boy being raped by another boy, and which is not really talked about. People say that that doesn't happen. Yes, it does happen. So with psychology, if the whole field exists, then we should take advantage of it and try to do our best to fix these things, to get at the root cause of it. What gets family members to get to the point of incest? What gets someone to the point of attacking someone else sexually, whether of a different gender or same gender? We have to use psychology. We have to use the tools at our disposal to figure that out. What is it? Is it a gene? Is it that switches on and off by a certain chemical? Is it just something that just happens? We have to figure that out. And I think eventually we will figure that out, and we will be able to fix these things in the human brain that causes people to attack somebody else sexually or fall in love with their own relatives or whatnot. And hopefully we will find answers and remedies and cures for other mental illnesses, schizophrenia and depression, all these different things. Find out what triggers it and how to stop it, how to control it, how to spot it before it even starts. So to me, the whole idea of okay, somebody was raped, somebody was conceived in incest, let's kill the child, that fixes it. No, it doesn't fix it. It makes it worse, in fact. So I think that's all I have time for now. I don't want to get into it more. It was supposed to be a half hour. So hopefully for the next episode, I'll address some more of the questions that I got. Hopefully I get even more. And thank you for listening. God bless and Merry King.